over at BangTheBook.com. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. If you want power ratings, we've got them. If you want previews and predictions, we've got them. Free picks, they're over there. All kinds of great stuff across the NHL, NBA, college football, NFL, college basketball, all sorts of stuff going on here, as we know. And we cover it all for you over at BangTheBook.com. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio, presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino. At BetDSI, it's only a game until you bet it. One guest on the program here today, but we got a lot of ground to cover. That is professional handicapper Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. Brad, how's it going today, man?
Man, it's going well. How you doing on this fine Thursday?
I'm doing well, buddy, and I can tell you that I will remember in 30 years where I was the first time Akron covered a game in 2019.
Oh, yeah? Where were you?
Home on my couch watching Hulu.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Although I did have Akron in that game. So they almost backed their way into an outright win, too. So, full props to my alma mater there. And we go from two pretty ugly games on Wednesday to starting with an ugly game on Thursday night here. We have not talked much about this game at all whatsoever, probably by design, but since it's coming up here tonight, do want to factor it into the equation a little bit here, Brad. NC State and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, 1-point favorite. This one got, I believe, as high as 2 out there in the marketplace. Even a 2.5 popped up, coming back down a little bit. I don't know if I could trust either one of these teams with my money.
Yeah, I got it at 2. No bet for me. You're right. I mean, neither one's attractive to bet. NC State's certainly been one of the more disappointing teams in the country this year. They've fallen short of expectation as far as the spread by 10 points per game. They've been banged up, especially in the secondary. They can't figure out the quarterback position. I memean, Georgia Tech, the expectation was this would be kind of a year 0 under Jeff Collins. But, I mean, last week was arguably their worst performance of the season, losing 45-0 to Virginia Tech. Statistically, NC State's been a little bit better, but I just don't see too much value. Numbers 2 for me. I'm not even sure how much I'm going to watch this game tonight, to be perfectly frank with you, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of intrigue in the sense that, NC State's defense has been atrocious the last 4 games that they've played. Now they're really stepping down in class after playing Wake Forest, Clemson, and Louisville. But still, I mean, Georgia Tech is, and I will say this, Georgia Tech is a team that you obviously want in an underdog role, and they've been okay in a big underdog role, laying points with them in a favorite role. I'm kind of surprised that NC State hasn't flipped to the favorite here yet.
Yeah, I mean, my initial gut reaction when I was doing my numbers on Sunday morning was NC State 1.5 is what I made it, just me personally, before I started diving in to my own set of power ratings. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised. I do think they're the slightly better team, but again, when you're talking, we're not going through a key number of 3 here. I mean, it's just decimal points at this point, going from 1 to pick them. I get it; it'll be 5 cents or whatever. But, I just not a high-value pick for me, bud.
All right, so we go to Friday here. We go to Colorado State and Wyoming, and this one's pretty interesting. I think Colorado State is a better team than their record would suggest. Wyoming is really not a very good team, I don't think, but defensively they're awesome, and Craig Bull's doing a phenomenal job with this team. Wyoming, a 6.5-point favorite at home here against the Rams.
I'm a little higher as far as my line on the game. I got it more in the 8-point range through a key number 7. I should be an auto bet on Wyoming, right? I'm not so sure. I am a little bit worried with the quarterback play last week. Vanderwall threw 3 picks, and the fact that they still only lost that game by 5 at Utah State shows you how good Wyoming is, particularly at the line of scrimmage. Wyoming's outrushed every single one of their opponents this year. They're averaging 220 rushing yards per game, only allowing less than 100. So that's how they've done it this season, is by controlling the line of scrimmage. Colorado State, arguably, if you had the 10.5 last week, that's probably maybe the worst beat of the entire season last week against Air Force. The worry I'd have here, if you're looking to back Colorado State, is they are susceptible to giving up some rushing yards. So that'd be my concern. I'm leaning towards Wyoming here tonight or tomorrow night.
What do you think about the total? We don't talk too much about totals unless it's something you've got a stronger opinion on. But, with this being a standalone Friday night game, I'm sure people are going to be interested in it. Total of 50.5 here. And as you mentioned, you can run on Colorado State a little bit.
Lean over a little bit. So, I think Wyoming, it's tough. Wyoming's more of an under team, but I think they'll have some success. And I also think Colorado State offensively will be able to have some success. But, again, it's tough betting overs in Wyoming games so far this season. You haven't necessarily made a profit in that regard. The under 7-3 so far.
All right, so we head over to Saturday here, and we start in the Big Ten, game 121, 122, Michigan and Indiana. This one opened in the 8-point range offshore. Michigan now up to 9.5, and even some 10s out there in the market, including Pinnacle and Matchbook. So it's not just Bovada and Five Dimes. It's Pinnacle and Matchbook now, showing that there's been some sharp interest in the Wolverines.
I'm not in that camp. My number's actually closer to where it opened. So I disagree with the line move, and I kind of been holding out thinking there'd be a chance it would go to 10 after I saw the initial move go against me. I'm not necessarily scared of it. Statistically, the teams are relatively close. I get it, Michigan's played a little bit tougher schedule, but, it's not a great spot for Michigan. Off Michigan State. Ohio State on deck. Last 12 years prior to facing the Buckeyes, Michigan hasn't been good. They're 4-8 against the number. I think people are now catching on and probably adjusting a little too much for how Michigan has looked the last 3.5 games or so. I think Indiana's been just, kind of flying under the radar. They could have easily won at Penn State, just like Michigan could have won at Penn State earlier this year. I like the Hoosiers here, but I'm going to wait and grab those 10s, and we'll see. If everybody goes to 10, maybe I should wait till game day and maybe I can even get a bigger line there. But right now the plan is for me to bite off a couple pieces of Indiana plus 10.
Yeah, I got this one 9.5. So I kind of agree with the line move to a degree. But, again, as you mentioned, a very tough spot for Michigan with that rivalry game on deck. And maybe this is a good time to talk about that. A lot of teams playing rivalry games next week. How much of that look-ahead factor do you believe in?
Case-by-case basis. In Michigan's case, I think it's significant just because, there's been that narrative that they can't get over that hump. And you actually, statistically speaking, I mentioned they're 4-8, and they've come up short by about 5.5 points per game the last 12 years. But it's always going to be a case-by-case basis. I think the market's reacting in some instances to it. Not necessarily in this case, but, down the line, Virginia Liberty game, I think that line's 17 because Virginia having a big game against Virginia Tech coming up on deck. So I do think the market considers it. But as for me, it's not something I blindly want to play on.
All right, we slide down one game here. Game 123, 124, Kansas State and Texas Tech. And this is a real interesting one here. Flip favorite scenario. Kansas State was favored early in the week. Now Texas Tech -2, -2.5.
I got to pick. So I'm on Kansas State here. I think a couple of misleading finals from last week has given some value here to the Wildcats, even though the market's against it. Texas Tech lost by 2 to TCU, but statistically, and if you look at game flow, they were out of it for much of that game. They got outgained by nearly 150 yards. And, Kansas State lost outright as a 2-touchdown favorite last week to West Virginia, but they had the yardage edge by about 100 in that game. So I just think those two results from last week creating a little bit of value here on the Wildcats plus the 2.5.
I think this just sort of speaks to what we've talked about in the Big 12 all year long of – I don't really know how to rate this conference all that well. You've kind of got everybody beating everybody outside of, Oklahoma and Baylor. A lot of these teams just feel very interchangeable. And my line, is essentially Texas Tech -0.5 point. So you and I are pretty much in the same range there. But it is pretty interesting to see that early week move. Do you think we come back down a little bit with some more Kansas State money?
I think that's going to be the case, but yeah, you would think I'd understand the market, but I'll go back to last week. I thought one of the most ridiculous moves the entire week was all the Navy money against Notre Dame, and how good was all that money? That money was done, 5 minutes into the game. So I think sometimes, you certainly got to respect the market, and long-term over hundreds of games, it's certainly going to be the case. But don't get paralyzed like Brad Powers last week when he had like his biggest disparity of the entire season in the Notre Dame Navy game. And after betting Notre Dame at a terrible number of -10, he got scared and really didn't do anything else, even though he was pretty certain after going through game by game for both teams that, it's not like I went ahead and made a major adjustment to my power ratings. I was pretty confident in it. But, and sometimes this happens in a season that isn't necessarily going your way. You get scared when you see the market go against you. But in a season, if you're having a great season, you kind of get, F everybody else and forget the market. Go ahead and keep on betting. I mean, that's sometimes what happens in disparate seasons.
Yeah, and that's always an interesting thing, and this is something that we can reevaluate after the season, because after each major season winds down, I do ask all my guests, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, what are you going to take going forward, and I mean that's a big thing for a lot of people, trusting your numbers, and somebody very smart, somebody who's an odds maker out there in the industry said, if you don't trust your own numbers, who's going to? And that's stuck with me here over the course of the year, and again, maybe that is something that all of us need to really focus on as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be one of my major takeaways because, now that I've been out on my own for 5 years, now I have hundreds upon hundreds of sample sizes here. And, I'll just take my 5 newsletter picks each week in college. They've hit about 54% over 5 years. That's okay, but, college football is my baby doll. It should be, I would like it to be in that 55 or above range. And 56% is my power ratings. It's actually a higher volume each week as far as my power ratings, but that's what they've been during that time. So to me, I need to be going ahead and trusting my power ratings. They don't necessarily have a good storyline as far as the handicap goes. There isn't a narrative. Situationally, it matches this, and matchup-wise, it says this. It doesn't make for good radio sometimes and good media just to say, hey, my number is this. I got to disparate it. I'm making a bet, and I really can't tell you other than that. That doesn't make for great narrative there, but I got to trust it more because there's about a 2% difference between my own personal capping and picks and just if I'm blindly betting every single power innings disparity that I have.
To me, and again, I'm an outsider. I don't know what your bankroll looks like necessarily, but it seems like maybe that higher volume playing your numeric edges, maybe that is the strategy that you need to go with.
Yeah, and I think I do. Obviously, it's tough because, as a business, who really a lot of people in the marketplace are still, here's my college game of the week, and that's it. And I can tell you the feedback from my customers, they don't want to bet a lot. They don't have the bankroll to bet 10 picks a week in college football. So they prefer to bet, 1 to 3. To me, I always ask people, how many NFL bets are you making? I'm betting like 3. Okay. You're betting 3 NFL picks a week out of 15 games. Why wouldn't you, out of 50 games, be willing to bet 9 or 10 bets a week in college? Because, that's kind of the same theory, but you don't get that from people. And that's something that maybe that's a change I need to make. And I always got to respect my customers and what their situations are. But if I'm better and I can get a little bit of a better winning percentage with higher volume, then that's what I got to do moving forward.
All right, so we take a look here, game 131, 132, East Carolina and UConn. Not many shows going to be talking about that game here this week, but we are. East Carolina up from 13.5 to as high as 15 out there in the market. And look, this is one of those decisions that you're left with sometimes in college football. Can you take an unpalatable favorite in a big role on the road against an awful team?
I can't. They certainly look improved. Last couple games, they've almost outright upset Cincinnati and SMU as a 3-touchdown underdog, but it's completely different, catching 3 touchdowns than it is, laying more than 2 touchdowns on the road. I get it. Connecticut stinks, but my numbers do not have it in the 15 range. I'm closer to the 12, 13 range as far as my pure power rating here. I'd lean with the home underdog here.
Yeah, I've even got this one a little bit lighter than that, and I'm not going to take UConn here. I think the problem is I haven't adjusted to East Carolina enough because Mike Houston's doing a great job with this team. And if this is going to be, not that UConn is a signature win, but East Carolina can get their first conference win here. And you don't know. And this is part of the problem too. Last night I did watch Akron for the first half of that game before I put Hulu on because I just couldn't watch it anymore. But that defense was fired the hell up for Akron. I mean, they were yelling, they were screaming, they'd get a tackle for loss and they'd all go crazy. That's a team that's still invested. They just don't have the talent. I haven't seen UConn enough to know if that's the case. So I don't know if the Huskies are going to show up here. I know East Carolina will, but I don't know if UConn will. If UConn does, this number is too high. If they don't, God knows what this final score ends up looking like.
I think you bring up an excellent point. Even though you would think at this point in the season, people got a really good read on teams and especially the MAC games because they're isolated. If you just stay in and lock in and be focused on those games each week and say, hey, I'm just going to watch this game, don't have anything else going on in the background, just especially some of the lower level games, I think you can get a good read what you just did moving forward. I mean, I personally went to the Bowling Green Notre Dame game this year, and I think a lot of people didn't watch the game, and they just looked at the final and saw Notre Dame won 52-0. I watched in the stadium. I was didn't have anything going on. I shut off my phone, wasn't looking at anything. I just watched play for play, and I actually came away impressed with Bowling Green and ended up playing Bowling Green the very next week against Toledo and thought they were being extremely undervalued in the market, and that just happened to work out. But I guess the big takeaway is if you watch some of these off games and just focus in on some of these teams, you can pick up on something. And maybe Akron, got only one game left, but maybe there'll be some value again on the Zips.
It could be. Again, I mean, I think the defense played really, really well. The offense is a train wreck. But also you've got an Ohio team that, they're not winning the East now. Miami of Ohio already locked that up. Ohio can get to a bowl game. They'll be, I don't have it in front of me, probably 24 to 28 point favorite, something like that against Akron. They'll probably get to a bowl game, but still, I mean, what is their incentive? What is their desire to go out there and win by margin in that game? Whereas Akron's at least going to give an effort and try to not go 0-12. So again, maybe Akron is a play on team next week, as terrifying as that notion is.
Yeah.
All right, we go to game 135, 136 here. Temple and Cincinnati. Cincinnati 10.5 point favorite. I don't think this game is getting enough love because I think this is a very interesting handicap this week.
Yeah, my numbers got a little higher. Got it in the 12 range. And I was on Temple last week, and my power ratings were relatively high on Temple, and they won the game outright against Tulane. I want to take Temple, though, here because Cincinnati just hasn't looked the part. I mean, what you call leaking oil, they've been outgained Cincinnati in 5 of their last 6 games. And, even last week, South Florida missed 4 field goals South Florida missed in that game. Otherwise, Cincinnati loses that game outright. But Temple's kind of been different. I mean, they got marquee wins at home, but they haven't been as good on the road. Not nearly as good as what they've been at home. I mean, they've beaten Maryland, Memphis, Tulane at home, but on the road, I mean, they got a couple of bad losses. So numbers say Cincinnati. My head, though, says take Temple here. So right now, I don't really have a bet here, especially with it being at 10. If there's still some 10.5s out there, I'd lean Temple.
Yeah, I got this one 11 myself, so you and I both in the same range here. But as you mentioned, Cincinnati not looking the part. I mean, they got badly outgained by East Carolina. They got outgained by Temple. The only game that they've looked really good in is UConn, and just about everybody looks good against UConn.
Yeah.
And then next week on Friday at Memphis. Huge game, but that's going to be a really interesting game too because Cincinnati is going to play in the conference championship game the next week.
And could play Memphis.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know what that handicap's going to look like. That's going to be intriguing. I welcome sometimes those handicaps because if you get a good feel for it, you can have one of your easiest wins of the year.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, too, because Memphis has the head-to-head tiebreaker over SMU and Navy. So, we'll see what happens here this week because one of SMU or Navy has to lose. We'll talk about that game here in a few minutes, but you get some really interesting spots like that here late in the year, and this certainly feels like one of them. We take a big leap down the board here for this one. Game 151, 152, Oregon and Arizona State. Oregon's a 2-touchdown favorite heading down to Tempe.
I like Arizona State here. I don't have a really compelling handicap other than a little bit of a gut feel. My numbers got it closer to 13, so there is that. But to me, I just think I've seen this before. Everyone's like got this sewed up. It's going to be Oregon. It's going to be Utah. And the winner's got a decent chance at least to make the college football playoff. I mean, that's what I've seen from most, or at least they're going to be really in the discussion there with, the Alabamas of the world. So to me, Arizona State's lost a couple of coin flip games here the last 2 weeks. One of them, main reason, they didn't have their quarterback against USC. And then last week, Herm Edwards lives up to it. You play to win the game. He goes for 2 against Oregon State. They don't get it. I really didn't downgrade Arizona State that much for that game just because, I'm pretty high on Oregon State this year. Oregon's, won 9 straight games. Everything's hunky-dory. Arizona State's lost 4 straight. The one thing I'll say, there isn't much variance in Herm Edwards' games. 15 of their last 22 games, Arizona State, been decided by a touchdown or less. And he's only one time in the last 2 years lost by more than 11 points. That was at Utah this year in the rain and the cold. I'm on the Sun Devils here.
Yeah, I like this one too. I had this one more like 11.5, so I've got a little bit of an adjustment to the market. If you can find a 14.5, I certainly like Arizona State a little bit more at that point. But for exactly the reasons you just said, I mean, this feels like a landmine game for Oregon. It really, truly does. You're at a coaching disadvantage with Mario Cristobal against Herm Edwards. And as you just mentioned, Arizona State seems like they keep every game close. The longer this game is close for the Ducks, the more I would worry about it here. And they're probably not going to get beaten by Oregon State in the Civil War game next week. This is the one I worry about for them because they already have the Pac-12 North. I know if they lose here, it would take away their college football playoff hopes. But there's something about going to Tempe late in the year. You got a very good fan base there at Arizona State. This feels like a real scary game for the Ducks. And if they win it running away, maybe I have to make an adjustment to them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll be pull behind the curtain. I mean, that's one of my top plays in the newsletter this week. And if they do go in there and blow the doors off Arizona State, I'll have a big adjustment. But I'm already, from a power ratings aspect, I'm pretty high on both Utah and Oregon. I mean, I got them both in my top 10. I think they're clearly top 10 teams. But I watched college football too much over the last 25, 30 years to think everything doesn't always work out like everybody plans. And to me, I've seen Arizona State even a couple years ago beat Oregon at their home place and almost beat Oregon on the road. So last year, so I don't think there's going to be overly an intimidation factor here for the Sun Devils. Yep, I wouldn't be stunned an outright upset, and I'll probably sprinkle a little Arizona State money line on game day.
It feels very 2019 college football for Arizona State to beat Oregon this week. I don't know if it's going to happen, but just kind of going off of what we've seen here this season, it would not surprise me at all. And you know what, like you said, I mean, maybe this is a good spot to kind of sprinkle that money line a little bit, maybe an 85, probably more like a 90-10 with the money line that you're going to get there. But never a bad thing to do here at this time of the year because also Oregon's got all the pressure. Arizona State needs a win for a bowl game. I don't think they're too worried about that. Oregon's going to be the very tight team here in this game. And again, when you're playing a team that plays a lot of close games and you're playing a little bit tight, there are a lot of concerns in this one, I think, for the Ducks.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. If it's close early, that's where the pressure mounts. So I think you can feel comfortable. The big thing is going to be the first quarter here. Certainly Oregon's not as dynamic offensively as what they were under Chip Kelly, but they certainly are capable of putting a couple of quick scores. But if they don't, Arizona State's in it in the first and second quarter. The longer this goes, the more pressure Oregon's going to feel.
We stay in the Pac-12 here, game 157-158. Washington's laying 2 touchdowns and a hook in Boulder against Colorado. Again, not a game that too many shows are going to talk about. Both of these teams have been disappointments here so far this season, but you got any opinion on this one with this line going up a little bit?
I'm more on the Colorado side because my number is 12, and I would certainly lean Colorado plus the 14.5. I mean, as disappointing as Washington has been, though, I mean, I still got them in my top 20 from a pure power ratings aspect. I mean, their 4 losses are by a combined 20 points. But, I've been kind of anti-Colorado, but that was a big win for them prior to the bye last week that they get Stanford at home to kind of stop that losing streak for them. just a lean for me on Colorado. It's nothing that I'm going to have, too much interest in.
I got this one 15, and I've actually been pretty disappointed with Washington over the course of the year. In particular, Washington's defense. I think if you want to play this game, the total 52.5, it has come down a little bit from 54.5, but I could see points here, because Washington's defense has not played well. Colorado's got that bye week, some extra time to prepare. And you can obviously move the football on Colorado. Maybe is it a weather consideration why this total is coming down?
Yeah, I'm looking. That's what I'm Googling right now on the fly. The fact I want to see weather this time of year, because I can tell you this, here in Vegas, it's cold, man. There's snow up in the mountains, even here in Vegas, that we just got last night. But no, weather looks good. Boulder, 52. So it's 30 today is the high, 30 degrees. That's what I was checking in Boulder. But Saturday looks good, so no wind either. So, yeah, you might be on something there.
All right, we stay in the Pac-12 again. Battle of Los Angeles here, game 165, 166, UCLA and USC, and this one's going up a little bit here too. So the favorite's getting some love in the Pac-12 this week, up from 13 to as high as 14 out there.
I'm on UCLA, though. Now, what's really scary is UCLA's pass defense against USC's pass offense, because SC even went to town on California last week. That is a major concern. But with that being said, I just think there's been a little overreaction to UCLA last week getting, crushed by Utah. I mean, a lot of it was the turnovers. They're -4. And they were already up against it, against Utah. But you're not going to perform very well if you're -4 in turnovers. Prior to that, I liked what I'd seen from UCLA. And they'd won 3 straight. They covered 5 out of 6. Rivalry game here. Chip Kelly got the best of Clay Helton last year in this game, getting 2 touchdowns. And what's the motivation for SC? I think win or lose, Clay Helton's done. Although I'll caveat and say this, you better make sure you get an Urban Meyer or a James Franklin or whatnot, because, I mean, truth to be told, I mean, with a backup quarterback this year, SC's going over their season win total by 1.5 games if they win this game. So, I mean, if you'd have told me that before the season, I'd have given a big thumbs up to the job Clay Helton did. So we'll see what happens at the end of this game, because this is SC's last game. They have a bye next week. But I'm on the Bruins. I'm interested to see what your take is, because I seem to be on an island on this one.
Well, I mean, from a power rating standpoint, I'd be looking at UCLA. I've got this one more 9.5 or 10.
Oh, wow.
So I would be looking at UCLA. Let me ask you this. Senior Day. USC, as you mentioned, they're on a bye next week, which is a really strange scheduling situation for them. So they'll just be preparing for the bowl game for quite some time. Unless something really crazy happens to Utah this week, which probably won't. What do you think about Senior Day? How does that factor into your handicap at all in college football?
I really don't consider it too much unless a team's got like a strong history of it. I think Navy is really good on Senior Day. That's one team, although I'm not necessarily wild about Navy this week against SMU. Case-by-case basis, and it depends on the team. In this instance, I mean, SC's pretty young. The majority of their best players, starting with the quarterback, Keaton Slovis, are, freshmen and sophomores. So I don't think it's certainly not playing a role for me in this game.
Well, there will be a lot of guys leaving early for the NFL draft, though, too, especially some of the guys they have there at the wide receiver position. So it's always an interesting thing, especially because for some teams, as you said, matters a little bit more if you've got a 4-year senior quarterback, something like that, maybe a little bit of a different type of mindset there heading into those games. All right, we go to game 173, 174, Western Kentucky and Southern Miss. And this looks like a real good one down in Conference USA. And an interesting line move, too, with Southern Miss down from 5.5 to as low as 3.5 in a home favorite role.
Yeah, I got it at 6, so I'm certainly on Southern Miss here. Maybe there's a little bit of overreaction to Western Kentucky and what they did to Arkansas prior to their bye week last week. But, you look at yards per play margin, Southern Miss is better, but significant margin. Both teams are in the Conference USA title picture. Both teams are playing well. And Southern Miss does have a big game against FAU on deck, but, it's a little light in my opinion. I got Southern Miss a little higher in my power ratings, and you factor in the home field. Again, I got it closer to 6 than where it's at 4 right now.
I have this one right at 4, so I'm right in line with the market here. But let me ask you about this from a Southern Miss standpoint. Again, we start talking about division and conference opportunities for these teams. Southern Miss lost to Louisiana Tech. It's the only loss they have in conference play. But as we know with Louisiana Tech, all the suspensions, they looked awful last week against Marshall, especially from the second quarter on. They play a tough game this week against UAB. Should beat UTSA next week, even without Jamar Smith if he's not back. But that's an interesting side plot to this Conference USA game, is that for Southern Miss, they've got to feel like they have a second life in the division picture.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head again. A new life for them because they were dead in the water. Because, Louisiana Tech was a game ahead of them, and Louisiana Tech had the tiebreaker by beating Southern Miss head-to-head earlier this season. Those suspensions, in my opinion, are going to cost Louisiana Tech because I don't like their chances this week against UAB. So it's going Southern Miss is going to be up against it a little bit next week. And maybe they lose that second game in conference, and Louisiana Tech can overcome it. But right now, it's Southern Miss got to be feeling a lot more confident than what they were 2 weeks ago.
All right, so we stay in Conference USA here. We go to game 175, 176, Marshall and Charlotte. I think this one's intriguing because Charlotte sitting there at 5-5. Phenomenal job done by a first-year head coach there. I believe Will Healy is his name. They're doing a great job there. Marshall off the big win last week. They've rattled off 5 in a row. They've got some division aspirations of their own here in the East. They do have the tiebreaker over Florida Atlantic. This is a tricky little game here with Marshall laying a touchdown on the road.
It is, but I got a factor. I was doing a little extra reading on this game because I was looking to maybe take Charlotte. This morning I couldn't sleep, so that when I can't sleep, I'd start diving into newspapers.
You never sleep anyway.
Yeah, I know. But looking at the coaches, Brad Lambert, if that name doesn't sound familiar, he was the Charlotte head coach last year. Fired. In my opinion, probably shouldn't have been fired. Not for what was happening last year, because I thought Charlotte exceeded expectations last year. Where's Brad Lambert now? He's the defensive coordinator for Marshall. So a program that he started, Charlotte, Brad Lambert, recruited all those kids on the roster. It was basically his program because he was the first head coach in the history of the program there. And now he's at Marshall. So to me, it certainly took me off Charlotte. And if anything, I think that's worth a point or so. I'm leaning towards the Marshall side now.
Ooh, that is a fascinating angle. I love hearing that. That's a great point, especially because, like you said, Lambert, it kind of blindsided him, I would imagine. He'd been a guy who'd been there for so long. They had a pretty good season. They're going in the right direction. And that's the thanks that he gets. You could bet he'll be very motivated for this game. And, of course, as you said, knows that personnel very well. Excellent point there from you. My line's 6. I wasn't going to be on the game, but if this comes back down to 6.5, maybe Marshall does wind up having a little bit of an edge there. How about we go to game 177, 178, Texas and Baylor. Baylor 6-point favorite here in this one. This line's kind of bounced around a little bit this week.
My power rank's 5.5, but I took Texas here. I just think maybe Baylor ran out of gas last week and legitimately ran out of gas. When you start looking at Baylor, isn't going to overwhelm you with the depth on that roster. 6 of their last 8 games, Baylor's been decided by one possession. They played a total of 5 overtime sessions. And, statistically, everyone's going to say, hey, you blew a 25-point lead. But if you didn't watch the game flow of that one and just went to the box score, had no idea what the score of Oklahoma-Baylor was last week, you would have saw Oklahoma with a 22-minute time of possession edge, a 16 first down edge, more than 200 yards more than Baylor. I would have said Oklahoma won the game by 3 touchdowns. To me, that's probably given a little bit of value here to Texas. I went with Texas last week. You got programs like Iowa State and Baylor should be favored over Texas at home, but I just not necessarily being a touchdown favorite against a more talented roster like Texas. I'm on the Longhorns here.
I like it. I like the handicap there. My line's right on 6, so I don't have an edge from a power rating standpoint, but again, at this time of the year, you've got so many other considerations than your power ratings, and that includes taking a look at stuff like that where you've also got Texas back in that preferred underdog role. So, there is that. And also for Baylor, did the balloon pop? They can still get to the Big 12 Conference Championship game And with a 2-game lead on everybody else, they probably should. But it's tough to get back to work here this week after the manner in which they lost that game. And like you said, too, keep an eye on that at this time of the year. Teams that play a lot of close games, how much is left in the emotional gas tank? I talked about West Virginia last week over Kansas State for exactly that reason. Kansas State played a lot of close emotional games over a several-week period. They fell flat in a spot where they were a 2-touchdown favorite. Does Baylor do the same here this week? It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be up every week. Now, the concern, Texas has played a lot of close games also this year. But to me, that roster, especially with a lot of their defensive players getting healthier, can handle it a little bit better than a Baylor as far as the depth aspect goes.
All right, so we moved down one spot on the board here. I think this is a really interesting game as well. UCF and Tulane, game 179-180. UCF a 6-point road favorite here against the Tulane team that a lot of people have liked over the course of the year.
Yeah, my number is right around 5.5, 6. So nothing, from a pure power ratings aspect. UCF coming off a bye. I know it's been a disappointing season for them. I thought they've been a little expensive at times, and the market's shown that they're 1-6 UCF in their last 7 games against the spread. But, I mean, they've lost a lot of coin flips. I mean, those coin flips that went their way the previous 2 years when they were, didn't lose a game in the regular season, kind of went against those coin flip games, went against them this year. They've lost 3 times this year, but all by 3 points or less. So coming off a bye, a little bit of a reset. I know they don't have much to play for because they don't control their own destiny in that side of the division of the AAC, but I would have a lean here towards UCF. I just think, generally speaking, Tulane's a little overrated, and it showed last week in their upset loss on the road against Temple.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, too, because a lot of Tulane money came in for that game. And
yeah, I didn't understand it.
And this is – go ahead.
No, I was on Temple, and I thought I had a good pick, like Temple plus 3.5 early in the week, and, number goes to 6, and I back off a little scared. I mean, you can't be a prisoner. You can't freeze you got to respect it, but sometimes you got to go with sometimes your gut feel.
Well, and that's been one of my problems, becoming a prisoner of these consistent sharp sides in college football. I have this line way too low. I've got this line at 2 because I've over-adjusted Tulane over the course of the year because they've taken so much sharp money all season long. I've got to trust in what I'm seeing. I've got to trust in what I'm reading statistically in the box scores, in the papers, then also what's going on with these lines, because every Tulane game, it feels like has moved a field goal in their direction all season long. And now I'm too high on them. And that's an adjustment I need to make going into next season. And, again, I'm not going to play Tulane despite the big power ratings overlay because I've become a prisoner of those sharp sides that they're not always going to be right.
No, they're not. I mean, in reality, they're going to be wrong 45% of the time. Even in a best case scenario for the Sharps winning 55%, or at least those big money moves. And who's really betting them sometimes? I mean, I think there's so many people betting the marketplace now that it could be just a lot of square people just following one move early in the week, and people just start steaming some of these smaller games, and a lot of that money that's trailing the initial move isn't sharp at all. I go back to that Tulane-Memphis game. At Memphis, Tulane was only catching a field goal, 3 points. That one was steamed down. How right was that money? They got crushed by 30 points. So, you got to respect it, but don't let it be the end all. Because I've followed a lot of these moves this year, and they haven't been overwhelmingly correct. Let's just put it this way: they're 50% at best.
All right, we jumped down one spot, but stay in the AAC game. 181-182, SMU and Navy. Navy now up to 3.5. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm on SMU. Little scary here because I thought it'd come down a little bit, but I just think that the market was way too high on Navy. They played 3 teams in the top 50 in my power ratings. They're 1-2 in the one game they won. Against Tulane, they won by a field goal, at the buzzer at home. Other than that, they lost to Memphis by double digits. They were absolutely, demolished last week against Notre Dame. SMU off a bye, extra time to prep for the option. I'm on the ponies here.
Yeah, that's the one thing is, how does this team prepare for the option? How well do they defend that option when, look, we watched that East Carolina game, and those two teams just went up and down the field on each other. But ECU did a lot throwing the football. Navy does not. So,
Yep.
Does that help SMU's beleaguered defense? It certainly could. And if you want to talk about, again, we talk about this all the time in option games. The opposition has to maximize its possessions in order to not only stay in the game, but, hopefully win the game. SMU is very well equipped to do exactly that because their offense is tremendously explosive. It's almost, to me, it almost kind of parallels what Memphis did to Navy earlier on in the season, where Navy, again, big time of possession edge, as they always have, but Memphis is just so efficient and explosive on offense that they capitalized on their possessions. I bet SMU does the same thing here.
Yeah, I think that'll be. I hope at least that's the case here. I'm trying to understand what's a little concerning here, looking at the total, because SMU I think is like 9-1 to the over this year. Their games, they're the best over team in the country. The fact that the total's coming down a little bit and is like 66 at a pinnacle, that concerns me, because if the total's coming down, it's telling me game flow is going towards Navy's way here. So that's something to keep an eye on in this one, because I honestly I don't see how Navy stops SMU, and I do, even though I like SMU in this case, I do think Navy's going to have success. I think both teams are going up and down the field.
All right, we jumped down to game 195, 196 here in the SEC East. Tennessee and Missouri. Missouri 4-point favorite in this one. Heritage, which is generally a little bit squarer of a book, now down to 3.5, which is kind of interesting to see here. What do you think about this one?
I got it at 7. Maybe I just got Missouri too high and haven't been aggressive enough in their downgrade. I mean, obviously it's two teams heading in opposite directions. Tennessee's off a bye. They've won 3 straight. They've covered 5 straight. Just need one more for bowl eligibility. I mean, this could be one that's worth 3-4 points. What's the motivation for Missouri? They're not going to a bowl this year with the whole eligibility issues that they had. I mean, Kelly Bryant came back last week, still didn't make a difference. I mean, their offense has been putrid, 13 points combined. 13 points combined in their last 3 games. They failed to cover 5 straight games. I get why the early money's on Tennessee. Even though I got a big power ratings disparity here in the other direction, I'm certainly not betting Missouri.
No, I have this one 5, and I kind of like Missouri or Tennessee a little bit because Missouri is one of those teams. We've talked about this a lot, even going back to when they had Drew Lock. They're a bully. They beat up on inferior teams. They're not the type of team I want to lay a number with against a pretty decent Tennessee team that is very much improving, as you mentioned. I mean, they've even had some games where they've kind of gone wildcat at quarterback and just have tried to do some different types of things. I mean, I think Tennessee's just going in the right direction here. Like you said, they've got that bull carrot hanging there. Missouri doesn't. But again, that number of 4, I think this game is lined pretty tightly overall.
Yeah, I'm not going to get too heavily involved in it. I was hoping to get a better number at Tennessee earlier in the week, to be perfectly frank. And I thought, I would be on Tennessee in this game, but now number's short.
All right, so we got a couple more games on the college side. Then we'll hit the primetime NFL games and send Brad off on his way here. Excuse me. Game 213, 214 here. Boise State and Utah State. This one up a little bit. Boise State 7.5 to 9, or even 9.5 out there.
I got a huge overlay here. I only got it like 4.5, and that's with
what I had too.
Yeah, and a lot of uncertainty. I mean, Bachmeier for Boise State, Jordan Love for Utah State. Both are banged up a little bit here. I can tell you, if Love's going to play, Utah State's the pick for me. I just don't get the line because, I mean, just a couple weeks ago, Utah State was laying more than a field goal. They were more than a field goal favorite at home against BYU, a BYU team that beat Boise. I don't get Boise State laying this kind of number here. I just don't at all. So it's a little scary. To me, the 9 is telling me maybe someone's in the know is thinking Jordan Love, the Utah State quarterback, even though he hasn't had a good season by any stretch. Maybe he's more doubtful than questionable.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that too. And also I'm wondering if, maybe our power ratings are off so far because maybe the books kind of opened in between, and we will see books do this. I mean, it happens actually a lot when there's a quarterback issue. If Jordan Love is, let's say, off top of our heads, let's say Jordan Love's probably 6.5 point adjustment to the line, maybe more. So maybe you bump the line up 3 points. That's why you get Boise State 7.5, just kind of cutting the difference of if Love plays or if he doesn't. Then the risk manager will adjust once we get some definitive news. The fact that it's gone up a couple more points here and the fact that you and I are both off 5 points on the game would suggest to me that Jordan Love probably is doubtful. And obviously that completely changes the complexion for Utah State, who only had 2 returning starters on offense coming into the year.
Yeah, I think that might be the issue here. And I agree with you. I actually would have had Love worth more than a touchdown coming into the season just because my thoughts on him were that, hey, this is one of the best group of 5 quarterbacks in the country. Certainly hasn't played out that way, but a lot of it probably is he just doesn't have any experience around him. But right now, I think he's worth about 6 points. So, again, I even made a slight downgrade in my Utah State power rating with my 4.5, thinking, I mean, that's kind of him, I would have, if he's out, the number would be like 7.5, 8 if he doesn't play for me. If he's in, I got to, close to a field goal-ish in this one. So we'll see. I can tell you this, if news breaks and he's going to play, I mean, I hopefully I can get, fast enough to the trigger because I really want to bet Utah State here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, this speaks to something you and I have talked about a lot this season. There needs to be a standardized injury report for college football, or there needs to be a website that does a better job of actually tracking this stuff, because it's way too damn hard to find with sports betting being legal in so many states now.
And I'll say this, I mean, so many newspapers. I mean, you could early internet days, 10 years ago, you had newspapers. You could read every newspaper. Now everyone's gone to a paywall where you can't read anything on most of these sites. So it's tough to get some of this information. And look, what happened with Louisiana Tech, where that information came out after the line had already moved. Think about the tens and tens of thousands of dollars that was bet on that Louisiana Tech game last week. I mean, get it out there. I mean, standardize, injury reports. And, it could be very simple, just like the NFL. Doubtful, questionable, probable. And if you want to play games and put a lot of guys as doubtful or questionable, then by means do it. But at least have the names out there. So, there's too many with legalization right now. There's way, way too much money at risk here.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said there. One more game on the college football side. We stay in the Mountain West. San Diego State and Hawaii. This one by listener request, and pretty interesting game, truth be told. Hawaii, a 1-point favorite at the open, now a field goal favorite, just about market wide at home.
Give me San Diego State for me. Better defense, they're less variance. And by that, they're plus 11 in turnovers. Hawaii's minus 14. Normally, I would say, Hawaii minus 14, they're unlucky when it comes to turnovers. They're not unlucky. I watch their quarterbacks play each and every week. It doesn't matter if it's Cordero or McDonald at quarterback. Those two guys are prone to throwing interceptions. That's why Rolovich can't figure out who he wants at quarterback. I think San Diego State, with revenge from last year, losing to Hawaii, something they really don't do. They lost by 1 as a 17.5-point favorite to Hawaii last year. Prior to that, San Diego State against the spread against Hawaii in the series, 19-2. 19-2 against the spread against Hawaii. The winner is going to go home with the West Division title. I trust Rocky Long. Give me the Aztecs outright.
I like it. Bold call there. And, of course, the Aztecs, perfect 5-0 away from home, only 3-2 at home on the season. But how about Hawaii? And, again, now this is about the time of the year we want to start thinking ahead to 2020. Hawaii's minus 14 in turnover margin, and they're a 7-4 football team. That's remarkable.
And, they played a relatively tough schedule. Look at all the Pac-12 teams they played early. So, I get why some of the, sharper guys are saying, hey, this team's undervalued because they've trusted – turnovers. If you're unlucky and you're unfortunate there, it's more luck factor than anything. I can tell you, throwing a bunch of interceptions sometimes it has nothing to do with luck. It just has to do with bad decision making from your quarterbacks. And I was in the stadium live last week. They tried to give UNLV that game last week, at least early on, and UNLV was just so anemic offensively and so poorly coached that they didn't take it from Hawaii. If Hawaii serves it up on a platter this week, I can promise you San Diego State will take it.
San Diego State tied for 14th in the country in interceptions, and they're tied for 7th in the country in turnover margins. So that could end up being the difference there in that one. We spent a couple minutes here on the primetime NFL games with you, Brad. 271, 272, Green Bay and San Francisco. 49ers, basically your standard issue 3-point favorite at home.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards the 49ers here. Generally speaking, I think both teams are overrated. I mean, the 49ers have certainly looked vulnerable the last 3 weeks. And, I mean, that was, stuff of legends last week with the final play against the Cardinals as far as the point spread goes. But, on the other side, I'm not particularly, thinking Green Bay has set the world on fire. They were very fortunate in their last game against Carolina. Now, they do come in off a bye. Rodgers is from Northern California. I mean, there's been reports that he's got that axe to grind with the 49ers taking Alex Smith, way back in 2005 over him in the draft. But the San Francisco's got the better defense. They're at home. Jimmy G's playing all right. Give me the 49ers.
One thing I will say to make a devil's advocate point here is that there was a lot of talk about San Francisco and the awful schedule that they played early on in the season. And look, I mean, by and large in the NFL, you could poke holes in every team's resume, say they haven't played anybody, they haven't done this, they haven't done that. But we can definitively say Green Bay has easily played the much tougher schedule than San Francisco. How much does that factor into your mind here at this time of the year with, 10 or 11 data points on these teams?
It should factor a heck of a lot. I can tell you, because the discrepancies are so much larger in college football, it plays a huge role in my handicaps. Does it play as big of a role in the NFL? Not as much, but it certainly should. Didn't necessarily in this game factor in, but you bringing it up and me just looking at the couple of the schedule, strength of schedule numbers right now would have me, kind of getting off San Francisco. So thank you, Mr. Adam Burke, for doing that. I mean, that's why, I really appreciate it.
But that's the thing here. At this time of the year, and I know you're not doing as much with college basketball yet. I know you're starting to lay some of the groundwork. You usually jump in after the bowl season. But with so much shit going on across all these different markets, it's hard to stay on top of every little thing. And that's why it's good to listen to shows like ours or use resources like our website or even listen to other shows that are out there. It's so easy at this time of the year to miss things. And you miss things in this business and it costs you in your pocket.
It certainly does. And strength of schedule isn't on the tip of the tongue for a lot of people out there in the marketplace. What I love in college basketball, and I think I enter the marketplace at a really good time when the conference play, starts up in very early January. You get some huge strength of schedule disparities from non-conference action where teams can be sitting there with a gaudy 12-1 record, but played two teams in the top 150. I love that, and that's my whole first 2 weeks of college basketball handicap. When teams get into conference play, that's my number one factor. So certainly it's on my mind here. It should have been on my mind with regards to the NFL right now.
All right, so we go to Monday Night Football. Baltimore and the Rams, 275-276. Long cross-country trip for the Ravens here. Yet there's still a 3-point favorite, couple 3.5s out there at the Square, more publicly tuned shops. Some heavily juiced threes at some of the others. But pretty much market-wide, it's 3 with extra juice on Baltimore or that 3.5 number.
I want to take the Rams here. To me, it seems like Baltimore's a little expensive, but my goodness, though, the last 4 weeks, I mean, they won all 4 by 25 points per game. More impressive to me, Baltimore's covered their last 4 games by 23 points per game. And we're talking, they played the Patriots, the Seahawks. They just humiliated a Houston team that's a playoff caliber team last week. I mean, fundamentally, maybe it's like the start of what Lamar Jackson was those first 7-8 games at Louisville, if you remember what they were doing to teams. I mean, I think it was like a pick'em game against Florida State, and they beat Florida State by like 6 touchdowns. I mean, it kind of reminds me of that, where the market just can't catch up. But right now, this number looks pricey. This is only the second time McVay's been a home underdog in his, at the Rams, and that other time was a Week 17 game where he rested a bunch of starters. So it's certainly being priced in the marketplace. I'll certainly take the Rams here at 3.5. What the hell? Give me them.
I think this is such a hard handicap. I mean, obviously you got Jared Goff at home, so that helps, because Jared Goff is terrible on the road, as we all know. Baltimore blitzes a ton, and we know that Jared Goff does not handle the blitz well. Baltimore blitzes almost 50% of the time, according to Pro Football Reference. They are they're tied for second in quarterback knockdown percentage. But also the blitz doesn't always get there a lot. And in fact, They only have 23 sacks on the season. That ranks tied for 24th. So they blitz a lot, but they don't get there. So how does Goff handle the blitz? Does he panic in the pocket? Does he throw off his back foot? What happens in this game? Can the Rams slow down Lamar Jackson? I think this is the quintessential definition of a stay-away game, which is going to be really, really hard for people with a Monday Nighter.
Yeah, especially with two very high-profile teams. I mean, we've got a lot of high-profile games this week. Are you kidding me? I mean, we didn't even talk New England, Dallas. I mean, Philadelphia, Seattle. I mean, it's getting to be that time of year where these games are more high-profile, more prominent as we get towards the end of the season. I think it's a very high-variance game. I wouldn't be stunned the Rams won the game outright or Baltimore won by 14 points. So that's maybe if you don't normally do those pleasers and those extra juicy above and beyond teasers, maybe this is the game to kind of do that.
Well, one place where you do talk about all these NFL games is over at BradPowersSports.com in that Powers Picks newsletter. Tell us about it, man.
Yeah, just go to BradPowersSports.com. You can download all the past issues of the newsletter if you just want to check it out. But, yeah, I mean, you get a game write-up on every single NFL game, every single college game. You get my top picks of the week. NFL's been strong. I never had a losing season in the NFL, and right now we're hitting close to 60% right now in the NFL this year. And all time, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of games in the NFL, 60+%. Remarkable. But I'm a college guy, and the college hasn't been so good. But, I mean, I can tell you this. You get more college information, whether it's winning information or losing information. I just be straight up honest with everybody, especially this year. It hasn't been great. Last year it was. You get a ton of it. I mean, you get game write-ups on every single game. So check it out. Download all the past issues for free. If you like what you see and want to sign up for the rest of the season, it's $49 to go to BradPowersports.com.
And, of course, as always, make sure you follow Brad on Twitter at BradPowers and the number 7. Brad, love this segment, man. It's always fun to chat shop with you. And by the way, NC State, now a 1-point favorite out there in the market. So I guess what we talked about here on the show is coming to fruition. But always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, man. Take care.